Welcome to the Gravity Well, where we break down heavy ideas into small buckets anyone can handle. In our work and at play, we seek wisdom and elder. Well, we seek the wisdom of elders, individuals and communities that share their knowledge and care for our water, air, land, life, and resource needs. Caring for our homeland is our guide.
Thank you, Alex. Welcome, Melanie. Welcome, Janet. This is a really exciting day for me to have. As I've told Melanie when we first met back in March of last year, really felt at home when I met Melanie and was introduced to the Alberta Talks and AEN team. Janet is someone that I've had the opportunity to volunteer with a few, oh geez, at least a handful of times now. So, and really always grateful to hear your insights and see your support in social media and in that space of trying to, as Melanie highlighted, address the concerns that our government is not sharing with the public. So, and potentially some barriers as well. So that is, we want to make sure that we are touching on the real world things that are happening, excuse me, right here in Alberta, where we live. And but we're just, I'm going to back up the bus a little bit and give you two a little bit of insights as to where we've gone over the last 5 weeks. And then I'll let Alex do the same. And then we'll go ahead and do our roundtable of questions with you and obviously allow you an opportunity to introduce yourselves properly as well. So just quickly, I've attached a file at the top of this meeting, and that is sort of the running tally of what we're learning as we go. So in our first week, we discussed why we are doing the Gravity Well, that we want to rebuild community and bring people together in crisis and do that in little buckets at a time, right? So we understand that we have heavy issues that people are facing. And so we want to make sure that we have it in sort of bite-sized pieces that anyone can manage is the goal. So that's our goal. And then we talked about our agreement. So we wanted to make, we spoke with our positive intelligence coaches. So as I think both of you know, I meet weekly with some coaches, actually Thursday morning, which is really nice leading into these conversations to be kind of grounded in that. And so they helped us come to, we need a community agreement. So we ask that this is a space for respectful listening and exchange of ideas in the best interest of the public and our planet. And that's of everyone involved, anyone in the chat or in the on the stage. The tools of this room, there is an opportunity. If you hold down your phone, you can do some emojis. So it kind of helps the conversation move along. You know, if somebody, perhaps we can't hear each other, whatever, something, if something's running too long, you can do a little GIF and offer, a funny way of sort of just helping us come back together. And then when, so we think this is a call to action. So that's one thing, Melanie's asked some amazing questions as we've gone along through this process, rooting us in, what are we trying to do? And so for us, the big thing that we see this room being is a space to help people take responsibility themselves. So we're not here to hold responsibility for the issue. So let me give an example. We had a conversation recently with a friend, Brad Chapin. He spoke to us about behavioral health and safety. And I had a really close friend afterwards mention that she didn't learn anything. There was nothing offered in that time. She didn't get the answer she was after. And so I said to her, well, as a matter of fact, we're going to read Brad's book and we're going to do it in Angie's room and walk through what we learn. So I said to her, you're going to have to be okay with this being a learning process for me as well. Right. So it's this understanding that, we can't know all of the answers to things. And what I really liked about Colin Smith's comments in our meeting with him is that anybody who's telling you that they know all the answers is probably not understanding the problem to the degree that it is, myself included, right? I learn every day a little bit more. So anyway, that's a bit of stage. So we did our community agreement. I'm going to try and be quicker with these other ones. I talked about Brad a little bit. So we talked about our fears. That was the reason why we met with Brad, is because we appreciate that this is a understanding of it. Being empathetic requires us to get past our fears and really try to listen to people. And so we talked about that. So I'll leave those notes with you and the audience. And then we met with Reagan Boychuk to talk about how do we source information. He helped us understand that we need to recognize that media has a centralization process that works in the best interests of corporations and special interests. It does not work in the best interests of humans. And so we need to look at it objectively, and we need to be looking for data that substantiates what we read, and that it is under the understanding of good faith. It's meant to actually help serve us. And then, as I said, we met with Colin and spoke about the laws of the land. So we're going to explore that conversation some more today, which I'm really excited about. And really, from Colin, we discussed that this opportunity to build a shared identity and have some fair and fast outcomes. We need to, like I've heard people say, oh, Jenny, things take time. Well, we unfortunately aren't dictating the time here. So I think this is trying to make sure that we appreciate the pace is not necessarily being dictated by us, and our leaders for that matter. And emergency preparedness. So this one was really special for me last week. We spoke with my husband and a gentleman from Northwest Territories. Thank you, Mike Westwick, for joining us. What an incredible conversation. I'm going to let Alex speak more about that, but when he does his. But really, the big thing for me is having a common system, having the system right-sized. Expanding a system is not a good strategy. It's good to sort of plan for the worst. That's one thing that Chris is really good at. And then finally, the communicating not only within your organization, but for anybody that could be touched outside of your organization. So anyway, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to let Alex do the same, and then we'll get to you two. Thank you so much for your patience.
Yeah, wow. That was a pretty precise summary, Jenny, so I won't try and give my own translation of the same thing. Yeah, there's a lot to take in each interview, and the level of trust and respect that all of our guests have given us, so that they could be open and answer some of the questions that we had and ask their own questions. It's humbling, and I think it's an amazing thing that we're setting out to try and do. And I also want to thank you all for being able to contribute in the ways that you will choose to over time. One of the things that I've learned through the first 5 episodes is that there has been a common misunderstanding that like each episode is supposed to arrive at a certain conclusion, when really it just arrives at better questions. And sometimes people have said, "Oh man, like how'd you learn that? Like you're smart or whatever." I'm only smart enough to know that I don't know anything, and that I have a lot of questions from the world. Right? I want to better understand it so that I can help do my part to shape it locally, in my family, in my community, and beyond. So I'm leaning on experts in their respective fields to contribute and maybe give their 2 cents on these questions that I have. And some of them may be difficult, and anyone at any time, if they've signed NDAs or they don't want to answer or anything like that, they can feel free to say, I'm not allowed to talk about that, or I won't talk about that, or whatever. Polite refusal is something that we welcome here at the Gravity Well, and I think it's crucially important if we're going to try and have conversations that can lead to better outcomes in our communities and abroad. So that's about it. And with that, I'm just going to give a quick preamble, and I'll do it in my fancy radio voice. We will briefly discuss the topic we are trying to approach with a few key questions. We will then open the floor for discussion. We request that everyone keep their responses limited to 3 minutes to allow others to share. We will close the meeting with takeaways, positive, negative, and interesting. We thank you for your participation. Now let's get started by asking one general question. What is the crisis we're trying to define? And so I'm going to model that for you guys. And like I said, when I'm done sort of highlighting why we're talking today, I'd love you to offer your version of what I said, say it in different words, but lead with an introduction of yourself. So I'll start off, like I said. So today we're talking about what is the crisis we're trying to face. Oh, Christy has joined us. Sorry, I'm just going to see if I can get you up on stage, Christy. In the bottom right corner, if I can't do it soon enough, if you raise your hand, I can invite you up on stage. Thank you, Christy. Perfect timing. We're just about to kickstart this conversation. We just did a little bit of a reflection of what we've been talking about. I'm so excited to simultaneously meet you and speak with you on this topic today. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and lead us off. And like I was just saying to Melanie and Janet, when I'm done, feel free to we'll just go around the table, starting with Melanie, then Janet, then you, and we'll let you introduce yourself and then explain your version of. And one tip for you, Christy, we were saying that if you hold down your photo, you can get some emojis and an opportunity to add a GIF. So there is a way to communicate as well as we're muted. Okay, so why are we here? So
before we can solve problems or question the problems that we're trying to solve, maybe is better stated, is to really understand, well, what is the problem? So this conversation is precisely that. I had the opportunity, just so you know, Christy, I sent it to Melanie and Janet, but I had the opportunity to sit down with Ruben Nelson on Monday. It was just sort of a last minute thing. So I had a first crack at this conversation. So I'm going to take, this is, keep in mind, this is try two. So hopefully I do better than I did in the first round. So I see the crisis as a social, environmental, and economic crisis. So when I think of social, just to expand on that concept, is we have an inequity problem. So when I ran in the election last year, and my reason for running is because I was working in industry and I was looking at the problem and realizing it was bigger than an energy transition. And then I subsequently was pushed out the door. I was written up and told if I wasn't in line with the organization that I wasn't I wasn't welcome. So I took that as notice, and I pled constructive dismissal and left. And then I read a book called The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee. And she spoke about this inequity problem and how her work was to design policies for governments that would help inform good decisions for the leaders, right? And so she noticed that this every time she put forward a policy that was an inequity serve, like to serve equity, it wouldn't be passed. And it was because we have this hump, this problem of our leaders are in this 1% problem. That's one of the conversations we had with Reagan, was the fact that we are in a 99% 1% problem. So that's sort of one way to describe the social inequity problem we have, and that we have to overcome. So in order for us to stay within the limits of the earth and serve the earth and restore the earth, because it is sick right now, unhealthy right now, that requires us to get over this inequity problem in what we're doing. Okay, so that's the social component. The ecological component I won't go into because we did in episode 4. So that was the defining the 9 planetary boundaries using the Stockholm Resiliency Center's guide, something I was made familiar with in 2014 when I worked at a company called Imaginea Energy. That was my first introduction to it. And then the last thing being economic. We have this model that is an ever growth model that the planet cannot sustain, and it's the wrong measure of success. For example, GDP increases with pollutive processes. So, we clearly need to decouple from GDP as being one of the measures of success of a country. So I'm going to stop there. And Melanie, I'm going to pass it to you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for this.
Yeah, thanks so much. So excited to be part of this conversation. Jenny and Alex, thanks so much for creating this space and bringing these ideas forward and setting a stage that just feels really welcoming and good to be able to discuss this. I always struggle to define myself in a brief way. And I loved hearing from Severin Suzuki Collis recently that she is an organizer for intergenerational justice. I think that's what I strive to be. I used to be a chemistry professor. Teaching planetary boundaries brought me in contact with the seriousness of the climate crisis and the recognition that the climate crisis is not a technological issue. It is a deeper social issue, and it's interrelated with all of these other crises. And so now, yes, I am an organizer, community organizer. I volunteer with the Climate Reality Project. I work for the Alberta Environmental Network. I am a mother and a community builder. And a workaholic also, by the way, in recovery. Very exciting. And for me, over the years that I've been doing this organizing and this learning, I have arrived now at the place of, I guess for the last 2 years, really, my framing has been that of a crisis of relationship. And my colleague Marie Tremblay at the Alberta Council for Environmental Education really kind of brought that to my attention. We were doing a lot of work around connection with nature, decolonization work, and so I think for me, this is a crisis of relationship that shows itself at all these different levels. It is a crisis rooted in arrogance, in a lack of humility, and in supremacy thinking. And it's deeply tied to colonization, to colonialism, to the I'm not a scholar in this field, and so I'm still sort of trying to figure out like how are all these things connected and the same or different, but extraction and that human nature binary that sets the human apart from nature and seeks to pretend that we are above and we are not in good relationship. And that really translates down to like we are not in good relationship with ourselves internally. We have lost the ability to grow up and be in good relationship with ourselves, with one another, and not fall into different variations of supremacy thinking. So for me, that's the root of the crisis. And I'll pass to Janet if that is how this goes, or back to Jenny.
Well, you know what, Janet, I should do just to make sure we respect everybody's input. I'm going to just reflect a little bit back, and Alex and I might take turns. Just quickly, I'm just going to offer Melanie. Wow. Yes. Thank you so much for bringing in the colonial aspect. That is 100%. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about when we talk about who in the next section, so I won't expand yet, but thank you. The colonial component is so key to this, to understanding that we all are seeking to depart from this system that hasn't served us. So thank you so much for bringing that into the discussion. Go ahead, Janet.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to address you all. I feel very privileged to be part of this space and welcomed in this community. I am fairly new to grassroots environmental activism and campaigning. I am really excited to have again been welcomed with volunteering with Alberta Talks and meeting you, Melanie, and having your mentorship, and then having the luxury to work as a paid canvasser, having conversations with members of our community and with the Alberta Environmental Network. I have always been an individual that prioritizes the environment, and I grew up in nature with a dad that is a prairie farmer, we could describe him, turned geologist, turned business owner, service company in oil and gas. My mom too, I come from a long line of prairie farmers. And with that love for the land and realization at an early age that everything is connected, my desire to study science and work in some kind of environmental capacity just grew and grew, and it was nurtured. So my farm, or the family farm in Alberta, is around Penhold. I studied at Olds College. I thought I was going to work in reclamation and clean up abandoned wells. I then worked for a petrology lab. I've also worked in mining for Minalta Coal as a junior environmentalist when I was in university. Did go down to the University of Lethbridge, studied environmental science, and then landed working in remote sensing at Ag Canada, and recognized, hey, I love agriculture. So I walked fields back when Alberta Pool was still Alberta Pool, and down in southern Alberta for many growers, diverse crops, recognized there was a thing called Feedlot Alley. I'd never seen a manure spreader up around our farm or in Saskatchewan. I was pretty revolted by that side of commercial agriculture. And then I worked as a crop protection specialist. recommending safe, sustainable, well, sustainable, I chuckle, integrated pest management for growers with most of the big chemical companies that you see in commercial agriculture today. I had a crop protection pesticide applicator's license, and I probably am responsible for killing more insects and ecosystems than I would like to admit. Um, so I have that level of shame, and I see
I feel you,
that.
sister.
And so thank you for recognizing that we come at this work through different lenses as we grow. And for sure, for me, I look at the environment and our crisis as we live in a terrarium. I listen to the book on Audible, The Tipping Point. I'm listening to more and more perspectives that I'm really happy to see discussed in this forum. I want to do work for recovery from our addiction to, as it's been pointed out, I think we're very selfish. I think that individually we cannot tackle these crises that are multiplying as we get closer to elections and globally. I feel that I do wear a bit of a tinfoil hat. I think the deck is very much stacked against us, but I'm not willing to quit because I think the importance of preserving, ecological health, that we cannot disconnect our health, the community's health, from the ecosystem. You look at a forest and how its growing is impacted by the species, the interconnectivity that's right down into the mycorrhiza in the soil. And I feel that as we become disconnected spiritually, people to people, we are losing the power of what human race could be. So as I shake and cry, thank you very much for the opportunity today.
Okay, so there were some amazing things said there. I was shedding a few tears, so maybe I'll just open up a little bit about my crisis in the past 2 years. I had, it was sort of it was an amazing turn of events, like I had seen sort of what was going to happen after COVID early on, and decided to sell my condo downtown and buy a house with my wife, because I could see that the market was just going to just collapse. So I had good vision that way. But I had moved from a downtown center life, urban life, densification, all that type of stuff, and then going out to the edge of the city and being able to hear the wind blow through the trees, and the silence was deafening. Then I got COVID, and then I got COVID again, and my legs stopped working. I had suffered full body muscle atrophy, but I didn't have a GP. All I had was a doctor, God bless her, Dr. Karan at the walk-in clinic. And I learned firsthand just how much work, how much active involvement, and how much support has to go into just providing one guy with a general practitioner and the medical care that he needs. And it took me 9 months to learn how to walk again. My heart goes out to the people who didn't have the family supports, didn't have the community support to get that kind of help, the help that I got. It fundamentally changed my perspective on things, and the sociological and spiritual implications of what those lockdowns did to all of us. The government overreach, the abuse of power, the isolation, the lack of resources. All of those things culminated, I think, in a general populist depression. By the time I met Jenny, I had learned how to walk again. I had gained 50 pounds of muscle, and I was finally ready to actually start doing something. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do the Gravity Well alongside her, because I think the socio-psychological ramifications that are a direct result of what's happened in the past 4 years, economically, culturally, politically, environmentally, they really need to be looked at. And Frankly, it's a terrifying prospect to look at it in the face. However, that being said, I found great solace in agriculture and planting seeds and spreading seeds, sharing seeds so that other people can grow plants or food or both. So I ordered a package recently of indigenous seeds, Alberta indigenous seeds. That's kind of part of the initiative that I'm starting just locally in my neighborhood. Sharing seeds, growing food, contributing to the water table, and helping to bring back the spirit of life that I think was directly attacked over the past 4 years. So I'll wrap it up now. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so just Christy, just to remind you, what we're hoping that you can bring here at this point is to please just introduce yourself, and then, as we say, offer your version of the crisis that we face. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Christy. I work for the federal government and I work in agriculture actually, but I feel like it's not really addressing the climate crisis. And so outside of work, I guess I'm hoping to have some impact. But I do see it basically as a crisis of division and distraction of the masses and a real lack of accountability that's allowed basically. Like, so humanity's gotten to this point through science and all of the technological innovations, and yet we're willing and able to just completely forget the fact that science is very clearly telling us now that CO2 in the atmosphere is at a tipping point. We are the last hope to change what's going to happen, what's coming down the pipeline. We have the chance now, and sure, everything we do after this maybe can help lessen the impacts, but really we're at the last possible moment, and I just think we need to come together and rally around something. And to me, that something is really recognizing that scientific fact, and also on the other hand recognizing that so many people in this world actually don't have even the basics and don't get to live with dignity or sufficiency. And so a new model that we could use, and that Melanie's well aware that I'm promoting this last while, is donut economics. The author of the book in 2017, she's an economist, Kate Raworth, presents the donut as a model, a visual essentially that we can rally around. I think she gives a lot of specifics that, different government policies that fit within the donut or don't fit within the donut. But basically, the idea of the donut, two circles, the outer circle is the planetary boundaries that exist and are fact, and CO2 is really the prime one. I think we need to get under control, but there's other things. And then the inner circle being that everybody should have enough. And if we use our economic system, design it in a way that that's central to everything we do, then we could really get somewhere. And so I'd like to see the movement over the next year, if humanity could come together around this. I think of Occupy. That was the last time we really came together about anything. And it was identifying 99 versus 1%. But at the time they said, where are the solutions? You don't have any solutions. And so I think an economist has designed this as a real solution that we could actually come together behind. And it's a great visual. And so there's potential on social media to make this a thing, but it's hard. People have their own things they're working on. I just think we could agree on this higher level donut idea, and then we could all go back to working on our passion projects that largely within these circles fit within those two circles. So that's my idea. So I'll put it back to you, Jenny.
You bet. Thank you, Christy. Yeah, thank you. I forgot Melanie had mentioned that, of course, you are working on the donut model economic. And I'm definitely a big fan of Kate Raworth and what she and others like Mariana Musado and some of the other, not surprisingly, female economists that have emerged in this. So we're going to get, Christy, just so you know, as we wrap up this conversation, if you can offer some of the hows around the donut model. That's, I think, what's great. So thank you for offering your comments around how you see the crisis. I forgot to take a note when you were speaking, so I apologize for that. But okay, so the next part is who are the key players? And so I heard both Janet and well, actually all three of you offer some, some of the key players around this is our leaders. Unfortunately, we are in this position where we have leaders that are not listening to scientists. That's what Christy just offered, that we are not honoring the scientific evidence that is telling us that we are in the Apollo 13 moment here. That's one thing I can offer you, Christy, in our conversations between Alex and I. We started, I would say we're in the Apollo 13 moment. We have to put all of our resources on the table. And Alex said, well, but Apollo 13 was successful because of Apollo 11. So really that's what we see this exercise being, is an Apollo 11 opportunity, like you said, Christy, to let's just, put a model out there. We can pick it apart and, finalize it and get it to a place where we can all see common ground in it, but let's at least know where we're aiming together. Go
It's
ahead,
the
Alex.
Apollo 13. Apollo 11 is the NASA's reverse engineering principle. So it's basically planning for the worst, going to the worst case scenario for every possible threat to life that exists, right? From Earth to the moon and back. So they tried to develop predictive models, account for every variable, and they successfully did. They got people back from the moon to and back.
Awesome. Okay, so again, just modeling a bit before I hand it off to you guys. So around the who. So we talked about politicians being key players in this. We have industries, primarily the oil and gas industry, as Janet mentioned. We thought we'd be working on reclamation. To me, that is one of the key things that is missing from the plans in our leadership. Is this is not just an emissions problem. We should be restoring life and restoring the earth as we go. So those are some of the key players. Industry, we have regulators that are not either given their keys or like their whistles, excuse me, or they're not exercising them. Um, and and some of the other key things is the land, as we talked about. Well, that's a big player that is often missed in the conversation, as Melanie talked about, and then I'll pass it off to you, Mel. Is Indigenous. I intend to have Indigenous wisdom in this room. I'm working very hard at trying to achieve that, and I'm excited to have Ryan Heavyhead in this room next week to discuss our needs. So, Mel, go ahead. Your turn.
Thank you. Great to hear from everyone on the crisis. And, as I work with our leaders, I mean, there's a breakdown there in how our society understands leadership, because the metrics of success are defined very narrowly. The CEOs of the companies that I know some of the folks in this room have worked for are doing their jobs very well. It is not their job to take care of the earth, to take care of humans. We have not built a system. We are not requiring that of them. Stakeholders are not requiring that. Workers are not requiring that. And of course, there are forces at play, according to what I've learned, that are, ensuring that that is the case. But at the end of the day, it does feel to me like the problem is people like me, people that I see in my neighborhood, people who could direct their resources and their attention into the direction of participating in shaping culture and society in an active and responsible way, but who have not had the supports or the opportunities or the curiosity, or what is it? I don't know. Because I guess, yeah, now my mind is going back to like the school system and the way that, I was taught about these things, but it was always outside of myself. It was never actually involving me in being an agent. Um, and so at some point, it kind of comes back to, for me, to this piece of like, we need to grow up, because, like, of course, like people who are struggling to pay rent every month, who are experiencing racism every day, they're not responsible to do this. But yeah, I guess, I'm just coming off of reading White Women. And so it's just very present to me that it's like, how many people are so privileged that they don't have to be involved. And how, and these are the people that I guess I'm trying to figure out for like how to get them involved, because our leaders keep saying, but that's not what the people want, and they're not wrong.
I find it kind of interesting that our leaders actually speak on behalf of people, but they never actually speak with the people, right? Like, this is one of the biggest problems with our leaders. They speak on our behalf, but they never speak to us. They say, oh, it's not my style. Or they hold a formal press conference, and then they just say what's on the paper and then they leave. And it feels really, really disingenuous. And
There's a term for it.
what's the term?
Presumed consent. Our leaders presume that we consent to their decisions.
Right. But they never check with us first. I think that's a real problem. So to develop those relationships with our leaders so that they understand the plight of the people, I think that's probably a really, really important step that may be being overlooked in the general discourse.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I think the key that I heard there is this, and it's one of the things about not only who, but when are people being engaged with? To your point, Mel, it is. I was at the Palestinian protest last Sunday, and I had a wonderful conversation with a woman there, and we both said how disappointed we are and the lack of like the people that have the privilege to feel safe and walking down the street to support people aren't there. you know it's heartbreaking. It really is, to because it is this challenge of we have to get past our own privilege to be able to have empathy with the people that need our support, need our humility. I'll go to Janet. If you're back, I'll go to you. Otherwise I'll skip and go to Christy for now.
Thank you. And I did unfortunately miss the
Okay, so
majority of.
we're just talking now about the who's important when we talk about the problem. Who are the key players? And I offered, it's we've got a government, we've got regulators, we've got industries, we've got the land involved. Melanie offered that, we have this lack of engagement, lack of active participation in democracy from people that are key with that hold the privilege in this, and that the way leadership is defined is not broad enough to represent what we actually need in terms of leadership.
Yeah, I used to always have great faith in leadership, formal leadership in government. Then that went out the window with Prime Minister Stephen Harper. I was young enough to recognize that what muzzling scientists and hiding the knowledge that the government had related to climate change specifically was abhorrent. Fisheries were collapsing. We were seeing the early signs that our economics were harming the environment. And then, so I used to write letters when I was in junior high and high school. And back then I would get replies. I no longer get replies that are specific to the issues that I identify to my representatives. And again, I'm feeling isolated from what I was excited about with a NDP leadership campaign. I'm now feeling very left behind, and I have a lot of privilege. So I also had hoped that with reconciliation, truth and reconciliation, that we would have the truth and we would work through the calls to action. I'm new to learning more about how we can do that. And I am excited when you talk about bringing in those voices, Jenny. Thank you for doing that. I also grew up against the Tsuut'ina Reserve. And they've been my neighbor, my playmates, my friends, the kids that grew up going to the public schools. And then in Lethbridge had the privilege of studying with, I'm forgetting the professor's name, but with a lot of people from the Blood Reserve that were going to the university and studying First Nations and an introduction there. I've got a lot of work, I feel, to be an ally. And I really think that it does come to grassroots organization, because when I talk to people, I find a lot of people that feel the same way. that are feeling that our voices aren't heard. And I do think that, yes, we need to recognize that economics don't work for the future. The economic model that we're operating within is definitely driving us off the edge. And again, I'm ignorant, and I'm looking to understand, because that's how I deal with uncertainty. I like to have a fairly good understanding of the pressures and the where we're at. So I feel like I'm always saying, oh, I need to learn. And so I'm a jack of all trades, but trying to every day do something that will be influence positive change, positive political and environmental change.
Amazing, Janet. Yeah, like I said, I just feel so privileged to be working with you. I think that's one of the reasons why grassroots is, you know, used right or wrong. It's a reason why it's happening because, as Mel said, we're not getting in the chat. Sorry, she expanded about, having town halls that where zero things are spoken about climate. I went to speak to my MLA, and he didn't even have a pen and paper out. He didn't have his computer open. And I said, "What's the point of this meeting?" And he said, "This is your meeting." And I thought, "So there's nothing going to come of this from you?" And it got to the point where he got physically right against me and asked me to leave, told me I wasn't welcome back in his office. Yeah, this is how democracy is failing the people that have the knowledge and the willingness to come forward. Yeah, I'm just gonna add Mark up here to join us if he's able to. Sorry, I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here. Oh, perfect. Welcome to the round here, Mark. So, Melanie, Janet, Christy, Mark is one of my allies in the Polluter Pay Federation. So Mark is, when we talk, I'll let you introduce yourself, Mark. But if you want to offer comment right now, you're welcome to. And if not, we can get you in on the next round, whatever you'd like.
My name is Mark Doran. I have a background mostly in oil and gas, but I also grew up on a cattle ranch. So that's Oriole on my picture there. He's a little calf that lost his mother last year, and we had a very illegal oil well on our family property, and it vented a lot of gas. And my mother almost died from asphyxiation from natural gas in her garden, and she contracted Parkinson's disease. And it's, I started, and this is in an urban area. So it's just amazing the whole town of Disbury didn't get blown sky high with this illegal oil and gas operations. And I was working overseas at the time. Had I, been home and went to this site, I would have gotten it shut down much sooner. But this sort of prompted me to start working with other landowners, particularly urban landowners. And I realized that the problems were much more widespread than I ever thought. And I think our crisis, see, in a democracy based on the rule of law, we have most law in our country, in particular in Alberta, and particularly with all the stuff you're talking about, regulation, oil and gas, climate change, etc. It all revolves around administrative law, which is unbelievably understood. And so I believe that the crisis is deviation from the rule of law. And I believe that one of the main solutions is a return to the rule of law. And that we have to start understanding administrative law principles. And lately there's been some real key players in the country that have just, thumbed their nose at administrative law. Daniel Smith's one of them. Jordan Peterson, getting reprimanded by his professional organization is another example. He just simply doesn't understand administrative law. There's several others, but so that's what I try to focus on. And I think in Alberta, the key thing, whether it be just emissions or land reclamation, the economic problems that are associated with that, they really center around the Alberta Energy Regulator is the problem. We need to reform that organization. And I've just been approached by someone who's going to be running they say they're going to run for leadership of the NDP, and one of their main platforms is reform of the Alberta Energy Regulator. So keep that a bit under your hats because they haven't announced yet, and I'm not going to say who it is until they do announce. But that's interesting to me. So anyway, that's just a little bit about who I am and what I see as the crisis, and also the solution. That if we have a return to the rule of law, we can solve a lot of these problems.
I
Yeah,
agree
thank you. Oh,
100%. 100%. My wife Andrea and I, she works in healthcare, and we were both talking about just how, and I've seen it reflected across the board. The administrative bloat just makes it impossible for anything to actually get done. You know what I mean? And if we were just to go back to first principles and best practices, we could actually make sure that things get done in a timely fashion instead of just sending it to another committee for review over and over and over again, right? Until everybody's just bled dry, So a simplification of these systems is crucial, and we really need to fight for that together.
simplification is a key piece that I love. Okay, so I'm looking at the clock, and I know, Melanie, for one, that you have said that you have a tight schedule, so I want to honor everybody's time. So I am going to offer that I'm just going to kick some of the last questions and let everybody have sort of some closing words, closing thoughts, unless, give me a thumbs up if you can go over the hour and you want to expand longer. That's also a possibility for me. But we've talked about why, we've talked about who, we've talked about some other pieces in here, but like where are we going? What's our goals? So, I really liked that Christy brought forward the concept of the donut model. That is definitely something we're going to have a conversation in this room about. Christy, is what does the model look like? What do we? And I'm excited. Actually, I through this got connected with Mark, I think his name is. So I'm joining you guys this Saturday, I think, unless I'm mistaken about your connection with him. Regardless, to talk about some models out there as well. So there's a lot of people coming together. I loved that Janet said, the more we talk about with people, the more we realize that this grassroots stuff is just so key. Start with the people that are engaged. And as people come in, that's what the purpose of this room is to hopefully bring people to you, to the groups that are working on things as they come into their understanding. What are the alternatives? So, we're talking about, I love Mark's point about the rule of law. We have entire industries operating above the rule of law, and that is primarily why we are where we are. So, wherever we headed needs to be fair and fast resolution, and that can happen through good rule of law. So those are my key takeaways. And then the how, like I said, we're going to have 5 more of these conversations throughout this year. So we're going to get into all of those things. But if you guys want to offer some hows in this, to me, it's grassroots and working together. That's my how right now. So I'll let you, Alex, lead off the closing thoughts, and then we'll go around.
Well, I'll try and keep it short and sweet. A lack of acknowledgement in the multiple layers of crises that we face, whether it's economic, environmental, social, socio-psychological. It needs to be emphasized in open discussion. Additionally, the bureaucratic bloat that's preventing anyone from getting anything done, and this sort of closed door policy that's making its strongest effort to maintain status quo and censor expert opinion, local input, a reconnection with Canadian people. I think it's a real problem, and I'm not exactly sure that I know how to tackle it, but I know that all of us having these types of discussions is a good start, and we can all do things in our own right and share our experience and our expertise with each other, so that maybe we can adapt some of those principles and best practices in our own lives, and maybe get the ball rolling. So I'm looking forward to rediscussing these things over the next year in future episodes, and trying to flush out some possible solutions with whoever's willing to dedicate a little bit of time. Whatever they can provide, it would be amazing. And I really think there is an opportunity here with all of us and others who we haven't met yet, even, to make a difference. So with that, I'm just going to leave it all and say thank you to you all for trusting in us and participating in this conversation. We'll talk soon.
Your turn, please, Mel.
Thank you. I'm just trying to find the name of the elder who I know I learned some really wonderful things from in Saskatoon at the Climate Reality event there last month. Recording is online, so it doesn't seem to be in this notebook. I should know his name. In any case, what he spoke of that really resonated for me that I wanted to share here is that, like he sort of spoke of this idea that he rejects that elders have wisdom, but that he sees it that elders have humility. Because as Alex spoke to himself earlier, if I'm remembering this correctly, the more we know, the more we are humbled in the face of what we don't know. And so that spirit of humility, for me, I feel like I see connections between everything that has been shared, and I very much resonate with Christy's framing of like all of this is fits within donut economics, independent of what you're working on, because the sustainable development goals are that inner ring. And so what we're talking about in terms of like rule of law, community care is represented somewhere in the sustainable development goals. And then the outer ring of achieving, like whatever we can still achieve with regards to coming back within a non-catastrophic, we don't know if it's possible, right? But the biodiversity loss piece and the climate piece as the core boundaries. And so I see all of that coming together again in like where we're losing, or we have lost community, we have lost accountability. We are so disconnected and so mobile that if you piss people off somewhere, you just go somewhere else, and no one knows and no one holds you accountable. And so like providing strong attachment, kind accountability, restorative justice with generosity and humility. I mean, it's something I'm trying to learn within myself, to be able to treat myself in that way, and then to be able to show up in that way in community. To me, that's really at the foundation of the how.
Beautiful stuff, Mel. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be working with you, honestly. Okay, Janet, you're up, please.
Thanks. Again, I'm learning so much and I will continue to. So I'm going to speak to the how that I commit to. And I'm going to use some of the language that I've been introduced through Alberta Talks and the deep canvassing education that I'm putting myself through. Will work through the cone of curiosity. I will continue to ask questions and persist with finding answers. I will support voices that are doing the same. I've always, or I've had, I've supported journalism. I will continue to do that with my subscription to Canada's National Observer, the Narwhal, the Walrus, and put my dollars where I see journalism upholding that pillar of democracy. And then, two, I think we have that opportunity with the leadership race here that we're seeing in Alberta. If we continue to ask and have these questions, I think we will maybe even see platforms change based on persuasion and public pressure. So that's what my commitment is. I will continue to do this, and I'm really excited to be part of this initiative. Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Christy, your turn, please. Maybe we've lost her in cell service again. Bottom right, if it is unmute. And Mark, go ahead,
Yes,
Christy.
sorry. Okay, I was hitting the wrong place. Well, just to say in closing remarks that I think the power of a hopeful vision, like a hopeful solution that people, if we could catch their attention long enough, I do think and hope that it would be enough to like get people to come together. So there's that. And the other part of the donut, I think the obvious thing is that this means that we need to get some of the wealth from the wealthiest in society. We never seem to talk much about the resource side of the equation. I feel like this is the very next thing that would be the talking point after we talk about the donut, is that, of course, why are the billionaires getting away 40 billion? So anyway, all of that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, the polluter must pay. This is a good lead into Mark. And with your closing words, please, Mark.
Oh, thanks, Jenny. Well, I think that the NDP leadership race is perhaps a once in a century opportunity to address what I see as one of the central crises in Alberta, which is how do we get our energy regulator to properly regulate industry in a fair manner and balance the rights of industry with the rights of the public, which we're not doing in this province. And you know, I think that that it won't matter as much who wins as what topics get brought to the conversation. So I think it's a once in a century opportunity, and we can't miss it. At least from the things that I work on, and so I'm going to be talking to Jenny and others to try to rally some major support for some you know movement in a new direction to in particular return to the rule of law on energy matters in Alberta.
Absolutely, Mark. It's now or never. As I think it was Christy that said, we don't have another chance at this. This is our go, and this is why, to me, this was so important that we have this conversation this year. I know it hasn't been perfect. We've had hiccups, and we will have hiccups, but it's too important, and we don't have the luxury of waiting. So thank you so much for all of you for your participation. This has been an incredibly expansive conversation. And I look forward to more with you. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.